Morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. This webinar is being recorded. It'll be available on the VisitNC 365 site and our partners page, partners.visitnc.com. As you want to ask questions, you can enter them into the questions tab on the right-hand side of your computer screen in the GoToWebinar menu. And if you're calling in, you can text a question or email it to guy.gaster@visitnc.com. We're really thrilled here today to have some great partners with us. We've got Kara Weishaar from the Travel and Tourism Coalition, Brian Lewis from New Frame and the North Carolina Travel Industry Association, and Lynn Minges with the Restaurant and Lodging Association. Going to have some fantastic stuff. We're going to hear from them later. But first, we're going to talk a little about what's going on in the state of the state. Of course, I'm Whit Tuttle. I'm the director of VisitNC. As you all know, we're doing weekly research to determine how this is impacting traveler mindset. So I've got some bad news, some good news, and some great news. Now, the bad news is what we're seeing is still 7 in 10 trips that have been postponed have not been rescheduled yet. There's a lot of fear out there in the marketplace. But I see some good news coming in that this week we saw more and more people think we're over the hump as far as coronavirus goes. And they think there are better times ahead and we've passed the worst of it. That's good. But then the best news we saw, and this is the 6th week of this study we've been doing, was for the first time there was an uptick in the people's openness to receiving travel information. So that is really good. It went from 37 to 44%. Now, it's still not where we need it to be to start marketing to people, but I think it's a reflection of that, people thinking that the worst is past and they're ready to get moving on. So we're excited about that. We've got a lot of things going on. I wanted to talk a little about our recovery. We're going to talk today about the legislature and what the legislature is doing. And about 3 weeks ago, Senator Rick Gunn came to us and he said he wanted to form a tourism organizing work group with business representatives from tourism organizations across the state to try and figure out how we can get to market once we've gone through the coronavirus. It was a great effort. We had a committee of about 12, 15 people from across the state. As you know, VisitNC and the Economic Development Partnership, we can't lobby the legislature. So it was nice for the legislature to come to us and ask us what they thought would happen. We put together what we think is a really solid tourism recovery plan. And if you look under the handouts section of your GoToWebinar menu on the right-hand side, you'll see there are 3 handouts there that are the results of this working group's actions. There's a letter from the working group saying they support this program. There's the program of work, and there's some Q&As involving it. Now, I'm going to go over what we've settled on as a recovery program really quickly, going to hit the highlights of it, and then you'll have it and it'll be available to you as we go forward. We started out by setting what the status is right now. As you can see from this chart, this is a job loss in the tourism sector. You see the gray bars, the Great Recession of 08 or 09, that was one of our low points. But if you look to the right, you see the magnitude of the current crisis that we're going through. This is 65% essentially unemployment in the state. It's never been seen before in the hospitality industry. We wanted to make sure when legislators see this, they know that tourism is important in all 100 counties. This is our tracking numbers from Arrivalists that show that visitors do go to all 100 counties in the state. They travel through them and they spend money there. So tourism is that place that impacts all 100 counties. And this is really the crux of our problem. We've gone from the 6th most visited state, one of the tops in the country, to having the 6th highest rise in unemployment and jobless claims. That shows we've gone from one of the best to one of the worst, and this has hit everywhere in the state. What's really at risk? Well, we know our competitors are out there. They've got deeper pockets than we are. They're going to be able to recover more quickly. They're going to have more funds to do it. We also know that the marketing landscape, once this thing breaks, is going to be very crowded, and there's going to be a lot of pent-up demand that people are trying to hit. There's also going to be a smaller pool of travelers. We see people that have health issues or financial problems aren't going to be traveling, who maybe would have traveled in the past. So this is going to be a real tough marketplace to come out in. We need to be there. We've also shown that our marketing has an impact not just on tourism across 100 counties in the state, but it also helps business development in North Carolina. People that see our tourism ads are 20% more likely to say North Carolina is a great place to start a business. And that's really important. And we've also shown that our work has an impact. People will come, yes, they will. People will go back to restaurants once this is over. But with our help, they'll go back at a much, much greater rate with better spending and providing more jobs. That answers sort of the but-for question. So we decided on an approach. We're obviously going to need a tailored research-based campaign. We need to go out there and look at what visitors are looking for, what the differences are now between before COVID and post-COVID. We're going to have to tap into those emotional connections to get people. We're going to have to use targeted media. We're going to have to find, travelers are going to stay closer to home. It's going to be a different world than what it was before. So we need to have a different campaign. We're also going to need to support our partners. Visit North Carolina does less than 5% of the tourism advertising that's done in the state. Our destination, local tourism offices, destination partners do the lion's share of the advertising, and they're hurting right now. They need help. So there has to be some type of a grant program to provide them with the resources to be able to do that marketing. We've decided on a plan that's about a $20 million plan. As you can see here, some of the ways in which it breaks out. We have to really get working on this as soon as possible because it's going to take about a month to ramp up to it. And then we're going to need to hit right when people are ready to start traveling again. And we're going to need to go out there with targeted media, and we're going to help our partners get involved in this campaign as well. It's going to have to be a tailored campaign. We can't just give our same old messages anymore. And we really think it's going to be important to have this really talk about the spirit of North Carolina, what North Carolina is all about, that esse quam videre that makes this state different, to be rather than to seem. We're going to let people know they can be themselves again. They can get back to the places they love. They can reconnect. And so it's really going to be a bring you back campaign. It will have a tagline that all our partners throughout the state can join in, and we can all be unified in the message. But what we've seen so far from the research is that where we were is that people wanted new and novel. They wanted to add experiences to their lives. Now what we're seeing since COVID is that they really want to go back to the tried and true stuff that they know and love. And we think this state can absolutely deliver on those experiences. We're the perfect answer for that. Between our natural scenic beauty, our historic landmarks, our interesting characters, and even our big cities that have that small town inviting feel are going to be welcome to travelers. It's really important that we look at this recovery campaign, though, as a separate campaign from our core campaign. You know, before COVID came along, we ran our core campaign in the media and we had steady growth in visitation. Right now, under COVID, we're not running any campaign at all. We're not getting any visitation. We need to change that. And in this recovery phase, we need to have a recovery campaign to help us grow, but we also need to maintain that core program for the recovery and for the future so that we can continue to grow and get this industry back to where it was. And it's not going to be a matter of months. It's going to be a matter of years before that happens. How are we going to do it? We're going to run TV, 30-second spots. There'll be high-profile programming. There's a beauty now is we can do linear TV, but we can also do a thing called OTT, CTV TV, which is trackable television. We can target people by who they are, where they are, and how much they travel, not just the TV network or station that they're listening to. So we can really delve inside the state and into our key feeder markets. We're going to do digital video. We're going to do travel sites, display and native, paid social. We're going to be able to pick our customers in this and get to them. We're going to really put a heavy focus in this campaign on in-state. We're going to ramp up our partnership with the North Carolina Association of Broadcasters, the Press Association, the Outdoor Advertising Association, UNCTV, and also some statewide media brands. I think our state is a perfect partner for this. They run a fantastic magazine, and those are the people we want to talk to. We're also going to use this for the first time to try and do some brand partnerships with some of the strategic brands that have locations in North Carolina, such as Advance Auto Parts, Food Lion, VF, Eno Hammock. These are people that have advertising budgets and they're looking for good stories in North Carolina right now. we want to partner with them and help them tell their stories, help them tell about their presence in North Carolina, and talk about the state to spur travel and also help them promote their message. And we think that can be very advantageous for us at a low cost. Of course, we'll also do PR and media relations. Earned media is the key to what we do. It's very believable. It's a third-party endorsement, and we think we've got great stories to tell, and people are going to want to hear those stories. So, you know, we can focus on our outdoor exploration, our small population, how we're so perfectly located for drive travel. But the real key to this plan, what makes it so different, is partner support. We know our industry partners are devastated by this COVID, and they need the power to recover. So we need to give them a stimulus package and help them get out there and market. We plan to do that. So what this campaign would do is it would focus about $7 million on a grant stimulus program to local tourism office. We still haven't worked out the details of it, but basically all those people that have been out there promoting travel, we would allow them to join into the co-op program we're doing and give them dollars to help market. Now, of course, we're going to have to expand our co-op program as well, and we're going to have to do some education around it as well to do it. But that's part of the plan. Of course, this will be a research-based program. All our efforts are research-based. We have several partners we'll use research on the front end when we decide how to do it, and we're going to use research on the back end to measure the success of this campaign, because we're going to have to go back and justify that we use these funds wisely. So this is really an overview of the total campaign. Of course, it's about a $12 million media campaign with $7 million worth of stimulus out there to the partners to get it going. It totals up to a $20 million campaign. Now, we gave that to the group that hosted this with Senator Gunn, and he was ecstatic about it, and he's presented it to the Senate. We've also had tremendous help from Senator Ralph Hise and Senator Chuck Edwards. They've been very supportive. And Senator Gunn has requested that we, the tourism industry of North Carolina, get this out to our local legislators and be a unified force to say that this is a way that tourism can recover and what tourism needs to recover. So that's our plan. If you have any questions about it, we can talk about it later. The handouts are in the sheet on the right, and we would love to talk about it more. Now we're going to get to the legislative update, and I think it's really what a lot of us want to know is what's going on. This is potentially, I think, the most important legislative session we've had in a decade or more, and we've got some really great experts here to help us and talk us through. We have Kara Weishaar from, I'm sorry, call this up. Hello, Kara. Kara Weishaar from the North Carolina Travel and Tourism Coalition. We have Brian Lewis from the North Carolina Travel Industry Association, and we have Lynn Minges from the North Carolina Restaurant and Lodging Association. These are really an amazing team that we have for us. They are out there every day fighting for tourism across the state with legislature and trying to support us in every way they can. And what I think is so fantastic about this state is we have a tremendous unified presence out there, and that all these groups work together. We talk a lot, we work together, and we're all on the same page when it comes to it. So we're going to ask them, first off, what is the most important issue you're working on right now with the legislature? Kara, do you want to start?
Sure, happy to, Whit. Good morning, everyone. As Whit mentioned, I'm Kara Weishaar. I am the Executive Director for the North Carolina Travel and Tourism Coalition. We are a member organization of about 30 members representing private industry and public CVBs as well, and some of the major sports teams. So we have a broad swath that we represent, but you know, one of our main focuses during this crisis is making sure that our members have the tools and the resources to not only sustain this crisis, but obviously rebuild as the market does open. And as Whit mentioned, with the campaign that they're hoping to run, you know, this could be a gradual re-entry. And so we're trying to think through what that looks like for our various partners. Some may be able to open right up. Sports teams may not have spectators for a while. We're thinking about our event venues in terms of how do you provide a play performance when you can't pack a house. So we're thinking through those things. And I know Brian and Lynn can speak to these as well. We can get into a little bit more later, but in terms of the legislature, thinking through really two big buckets. Are there regulatory changes that need to happen? And then also looking at those funding opportunities from the state level with what Whit just mentioned, but I think also looking at what the federal stimulus packages through the CARES Act and potentially the fourth package that's working its way through Congress this week. As those funds come through the state, working with our state leaders and the administration to make sure that those funds are directed and eligible for our tourism partners, whether they're public or private. So I can go into more detail in a little bit, but that's my snapshot. School calendar is obviously important to protect and maintain in this unique and challenging time. And then also looking at occupancy taxes, as those have dried up in many ways for our convention and visitor bureaus. How do we make sure that those are maintained moving forward? And I know Lynn and Brian have a lot to offer as well with what they're working on. So I'll pause there and let others speak.
Yeah, that's great. And so, Brian, I know school calendar has been something that NCTIA has been really focused on. Maybe you can talk about the issues you're working on with.
Sure, thanks, Whit. And it's great to be on the panel with Kara and Lynn. I wish I was in Asheville with you. I wish I was with everyone who's dialed in too in Asheville. It's such a shame that we can't be together. The big issue that we are working on, and by the way, I represent the North Carolina Travel Industry Association. We work with Kara and Lynn's group closely at the General Assembly. Our number one message to the legislature is do no harm, do no more harm to the tourism industry. Our executive director, Vince Shalina, testified a couple weeks ago to the COVID-19 economic work group, and he outlined for the legislators just how devastating the COVID-19 has been, the state stay-at-home order, how it's affected not only the occupancy tax, but it has just affected people have canceled conferences, including the one that we were supposed to attend. But some of the things that we are hearing from legislators is that there are groups out there that are using the COVID-19 pandemic to advance their legislative agenda, which is to do away with the summer calendar law, which is in its 16th year. There are proposals that would not only do away with August, which is our second largest month for summer tourism, but also would like to creep into July. So basically, we're looking at a proposal that would have us go to school up into the Independence Day holiday, take a couple weeks off, and then resume school in mid to late July. For NCTIA, the proposals that we've seen, the latest being starting on August 17th, we've just had to say that tourism can take no more harm. We're not blaming the General Assembly for COVID-19. We're certainly appreciative of Governor Cooper and everything that he has done with Secretary Cohen to keep us safe. However, we are the second largest contributor to our public schools. We are the second largest contributor to our tax base, and we just can't take one more bad thing, including creeping into our second largest tourism month. So the big thing with bottom line, do no more harm to tourism. In fact, this is the time to bolster tourism.
That's excellent, Brian. Appreciate that. And now our next champion, our former state tourism director and somebody who's always out there fighting for us, Lynn Minges.
Well, thanks so much, Whit, for your leadership for pulling this together. First and foremost, kudos for your excellent work on the $20 million ask of the General Assembly. We will be out there championing that, and I know that our colleagues around the state will do that as well. It's critical, particularly at a time when our restaurants and hotels need you to lead to get people back into our state and traveling again to feel comfortable with that. And so it's so important that we all embrace that, and we will put that at the top of our legislative agenda. However, to be candid with you, our first and most important agenda item going into the short session that will begin on April 28th is support for small businesses, and specifically support for restaurants and hotels. As you all know, there are 18,500 lodging establishments in North Carolina and about 1,800 lodging establishments, 18,500 food service establishments in our state. And they are literally shut down and or on life support. We put on a happy face. You see that we're doing delivery and takeout and drive-through, but the reality is that we're about 80% down. I mean, 70 to 80% down. I mean, our restaurants who are providing these kinds of services are really on life support. They're not making money. They're still losing money even at that limited capacity. And so we've got to find some relief for them and really fast. I'll touch quickly on some of the things we've been doing and pivot to kind of what our focuses are going forward. So as you all know, when our restaurants were shut down abruptly, and rightly so, at the height of COVID-18, this was, kind of a March 13th, I guess, is when all the avalanche began to happen. And then on the 17th, we shuttered restaurants across our state for in-service dining. We began to work and did work very, very closely with the governor's office and continue that effort today. We talk daily, multiple times a day. And so we have done things like carve out essential services. So as you'll notice, they've been very kind to us. Restaurants and hotels have very limited restrictions on their operations other than the in-room dining, which certainly is a restriction, but they've been pretty kind to us, and we've asked for those carve-outs and exceptions, and they've granted them. They have been very generous with things like unemployment insurance, so that as we've had to lay off nearly 350,000 North Carolinians, members of our hospitality community, they were eligible immediately for unemployment insurance. Just yesterday, the governor expanded that executive order to take away a wait period for those who receive severance pay, and that's huge. I've had calls from all over the country today about colleagues, how in the world did you get that to happen? We're doing these kind of things to try to make sure that as we separate employees, they're being taken care of, because as you might imagine, we're in the hospitality business. In a heartwarming way, the number one thing people were concerned about, first and foremost, business owners, was their employees. And so they worked hard to take care of those employees and continue to do that today. As you probably know, we created a North Carolina Hospitality Workers Relief Fund, and to date we've raised nearly $800,000 in that fund, and we're awarding one-time checks to those separated employees in the amount of $500 each. So that's going a long way. Many of our state's banks and corporate partners have stepped up to fund that, and that certainly is important in taking care of our employees. You know that most of those are eligible for not only the state unemployment insurance that they will get, but also a $600 a week supplement that will run through the end of July. So, taking care of our own, taking care of our hospitality family has been an important priority as we've kind of been embarking on this situation. But then we pivoted to small business owners. How do we help them? And so you all are all too familiar with the PPP, the Payroll Protection Plan, that was a part of the CARES Act, and that really was the only business relief that was offered to restaurants and hotels and small businesses, but we're really focused on restaurants and hotels. The plan had problems. As you know, only 9% of all the funds that were awarded went to restaurants and hotels, only 9%. Construction, other sectors received far more money than we did. So if you look at all the loans that have been approved through that first wave of funding, only 9% went to restaurants. And then if you quail down and look at North Carolina small businesses as a whole, only of all those dollars that were expended, only 4.3% of those dollars came to North Carolina. So the takeaway is that restaurants and hotels were largely left out of the mix. We got, even though we were the primary industry to feel the brunt of this, we got left out in the cold with the PPP and the CARES Act. And North Carolina small businesses specifically got left out in the cold. So we're on that, and we're beginning to talk about that. That's our new narrative. With regard to the PPP, and I'll just touch on that because it does lead into the legislative session and kind of our ways we'll address the gaps. But with regard to the PPP, as you all know, Congress is not in session right now. And so anything we do with the PPP in the short term, they won't come back until May. The only thing we can do is something that they could vote on by unanimous consent. In other words, no changes are going to be made to the PPP, and no new federal programs are going to be put in place. So right now, the ask in front of Congress, and it passed through the Senate, will be voted on the House probably as we're speaking this morning, will be to add additional dollars, I think another $484 billion to the program, $384 billion to the program. So it will add additional money to the PPP. That's great. That means more people will be served. It doesn't fix the problems with the PPP. So what are we doing about that? Congress is out of session. We can't fix it, and we don't feel like we can wait. They're getting more money. We want to address the problem. So we are working, obviously, not just us here in North Carolina, but we're working with our partners with the American Hotel and Lodging Association, the National Restaurant Association. There's a group of independent restaurant coalition members working out there. Many of those are our members, so we're working with them. And we're working with AHOA, our Asian American Hotel Owners Association. They're our federal lobbyists. And so together, we're working to get some changes to the PPP. So how do we do that when Congress is out of session? We're currently working with the U.S. Treasury Department on 3 main fixes that need to be taken, need to be made with the PPP. And they are evolve, and they kind of vary depending on the group that's doing the lobbying, those 4 that I mentioned. But really, the covered period isn't working for us. 8 weeks is ridiculous. We probably won't be back open and in business and staffed up in 8 weeks, beginning from when they take the loan. So we've got to get that period. We'd like to see the clock start working when we are able to open back up and extend for a longer period of time, maybe even up to the end of the year. So that's the first thing we're asking for. And we believe we can get that fixed administratively through the U.S. Treasury Department. The second thing that we are asking them to do is to take a look at the 75% payroll requirement. Right now, if you get a PPP, 75% of those dollars has to be spent on payroll. Well, that model just doesn't work, particularly for hotels, because they don't spend 75% of their revenue. Most of their revenue goes to debt service, small percentages to staffing. So that model doesn't work for them. We are asking for some changes, and we think we can get that done administratively without having to go back through Congress, which, believe me, is going to be a nightmare when they get back to town, because this thing is getting politicized greatly. And then the third fix is the terms on the repayment. Right now it's 2 years, again, ridiculous for companies that are going to be digging out from big, deep debt holes. We're going to be asking for an extension of 10 years. And so we hope we can get that fixed. Then when they do come back into session, which will be early May, and this part of Congress will be a long, complicated political process. This will not go through quickly like the last bill did. We will then be looking to layer in some additional asks, and those will be things like tax credits to restaurants and hotels who've had to add additional safety precautions. There will be some provisions about business interruption insurance, and that is when we will address the 401c6 issue that would allow DMOs, CVBs, and trade associations like the 3 of ours to benefit from some federal relief. But that really won't happen until May. And so strategically, what we're trying to do is layer our ask. Let's ask today for what we can get fixed today. And next week, let's ask for what they're going to be focused on next week, rather than trying to, heap too much on them at one time. It's the timing of the ask. And then, so how does that affect the upcoming legislative session? As I mentioned, most small businesses in our state are not seeing relief. They're not feeling relief. We did a survey, and I'm on a call right after this one to kind of go through the survey results. But top line of what I reviewed last night said that the majority of our businesses tell me that they cannot sustain 2 months of business interruption. That's really scary. You heard me say that there are 18,500 food service establishments. Most of them, the majority of them, are telling me they can't sustain 2 months. And best I check, we're what, 6 weeks in here? So they're in trouble, and I mean they're in real trouble. And don't think that it's size or the kind of food they serve or geography. And don't think that this is limited to just restaurants. Many of our hotels are in pretty bad shape also. So, they've got to see some relief quickly. So we have been working with the General Assembly since the day this all happened. We've spoken with every single member of the General Assembly, many of them multiple times, and we are pushing hard. And it was on our ask list from the day we first started talking with them to my testimony to the Business Recovery House Task Force. We've been asking for a $100 million grant program. Our first ask was a grant, and then we've learned constitutionally the state government can't give business money, free money. So what we're getting instead is a bill that was dropped yesterday, a draft bill. I don't think it's public yet, but it will provide for $75 million. We're already pushing to get that to 100 or more in relief that will flow through the Rural Center and Golden Leaf that will allow small business owners across North Carolina to apply for grants, or loans, 0% interest loans in the amount of $50,000. And those will be no payments due and no interest for the first 6 months. And then after 6 months, if businesses need that much time to repay those loans, the terms will be very favorable, something like 4.3%. We're still working on that percentage. So more to come on that, but that loan payment is critical. There are plenty of issues facing our industry right now. My colleagues have already touched on several of those, but if we don't have an industry to serve, we're going to have a big problem. So our main focus, even though our colleagues, and we commend, Brian and Kara and Whit, the great work you all are doing, we're all in this together. But our main focus is going to be trying to keep restaurants and hotels viable so we can get through this and get back in business. Sorry for the long-winded response, but a lot going on in our world these days.
No, I think that's great, Lynn, and that's the key. We've always said, when I've talked with every legislator, I've said that this is a two-phase issue. The second phase is where I can help. That's marketing, once people are ready to travel. But we have to have businesses survive the first phase to be able to give things to those travelers when they travel and have a way for them to spend. And if our businesses don't survive, that second phase doesn't really matter that much, because when people are ready to travel, there will be no way to spend your money. And that's not going to help the state. So I think that's a great point for this. We also talked a little about the session. So maybe, Kara, can you tell us how this session is going to lay out? Because this is a little different than your typical session.
Yeah, thanks, Whit. So Lynn and Brian and I have obviously been working with legislators leading up to session, but it officially starts on Tuesday, April 28th. So we'll go into session a week from yesterday. My understanding is that they are going to do remote committee meetings. They're going to file these bills like the one that Lynn just mentioned that NCRLA has been working so well on. They're going to file those next week, have them go through the committee process. And it's my understanding that they want legislators in person by Thursday, April 30th. And they're going to put strict guidelines in place. No public is allowed. So us lobbyists won't be walking the halls. The general public won't be permitted to attend. It will be legislators and certain essential staff, as they're deemed appropriate, will be in the building. They're going to allow for things like extended voting periods. So typically there's only like 20 or 15 seconds to cast your vote when you're in the House or the Senate chamber. They're going to allow, I think, 30 minutes to an hour for that to occur, so that the legislators can protect themselves and appropriately socially distance themselves and come in groups. I think some of them might be sitting up, not even in their seats, but elsewhere in the chamber. So they've got some logistics to work out. But the House has been working. They've got 4 working groups on COVID-19. They've got economic development, which is where the Golden Leaf $75 million draft proposal was considered this week. They've got continuity of state government. As you all can imagine, there's a myriad of functions that the state government provides that if you're not doing it in person, or you don't have a means legally to do electronically, like an electronic notary or those types of situations, there's going to be a draft bill to address those criteria. There's a working group on healthcare, as there should be, not only to fund the hospitals and providers for their losses, but also their work on COVID patients, the PPE, the protective equipment for masks and gloves and other things. And then obviously education, that's another work group. And what's interesting, they've skirted around the edges, but Brian did a great job of explaining when you talk about school calendar and how this crisis is impacting children and their ability to go to school, and what does that mean for opening us back up and protecting our summer for the tourism industry, because those dollars are not only important to the industry getting back up and running, they're crucial, but they also fund things like education. So it's really, it's that symbiotic relationship between our tourism revenue and funding the school system. So we've got to keep that at top of mind. There's been proposals, as Brian said, that would start us in July. There's still proposals swirling around. I do think the latest one we've heard is, instead of going back on August 24th, potentially bumping that up a week to the 17th. Our board is meeting later today, actually, to discuss this. We're looking at the options, and we're certainly open to listening and learning about what they're proposing. Our main focus is to ensure that the school calendar law stays intact, that this doesn't become an opportunity to do away with the law or somehow impact it long-term in a way that's negative for the tourism industry. So we're going to do all we can to protect summer as best we can, recognizing that this is an unprecedented global pandemic. and children have been out of school for 2 months, likely 3 months when it's all said and done. So we're gonna have those discussions and want to be listening and consider all options, but certainly protecting summer and protecting the industry when we can get back up and running is important. And then lastly, so we're going to have this short session. It's going to be related particularly to COVID. I've even heard that they might come back later in May if they can't do it all right now. And then, as you all know, the state has extended our tax filings to July 15th. So we don't have a good picture of state revenue. We know it's going to be down. We know that the state economist, Barry Boardman, has recently estimated, we're looking at 10–11% reduction in state revenues, which is about $2 to $2.5 billion with a B. So, as we're all looking for funding, I think that's important to keep in mind, is that the state isn't going to have a ton of resources to put out. So it is important to prioritize what you want and be able to communicate that effectively with legislators. But because they're not going to know what their revenues are until about mid-July, they're probably not going to come back into session again until mid to late July into August. So we're almost looking at 2 separate short sessions. And that's what we know today. Obviously, this is a fast-moving situation. Things are always evolving and changing, so more can change. But I think we're going to see a short, socially distanced session next week and potentially the following week. And then they'll come back, I think, for more budget and other items later in the summer. Brian, probably.
And Brian, you see the same thing happening there, that you think this, I know that pushing back the taxes coming in is going to have a big impact on what they can do and when they can do it. You see that too, Brian?
Yeah. So let me put it in that was great. What Kara said is 100% correct. One thing that we're kind of fortunate about is that we had a budget impasse last summer between the General Assembly and Governor Cooper. And because of that impasse, the state did not dole out raises to teachers and many public support personnel in the schools, which left about $1.5 billion on the table. That $1.5 billion combined with about $1.5 billion in the rainy day fund, which, by the way, it is raining in North Carolina. You take that $3 billion, and in some ways, budget writers and all of us might have benefited. I don't think we were saying this 6 months ago, but now it's kind of like we're glad we didn't spend that money. We might be able to withstand some of the brunt that we are seeing in sales tax revenue. Lynn's, restaurants are on the front line of that. The occupancy tax is down, which is hurting municipalities, which, by the way, one of the things that NCTIA is working on is this occupancy tax issue. In that later session that Kara talked about, when they come back and put the budget together, we have been talking to Representative Jason Sane out of Lincoln County. He's an appropriations chair. He's also a former finance chair. He is a big supporter of the occupancy tax. One of the programs that we have been talking with him about is this idea that there would be, similar to what Lynn is proposing for restaurants and hotels, there would be a bridge loan for CVBs who are also finding that their revenue has been decimated by COVID-19, that there would be some bridge program put together in that July budget that would bridge them to greener pastures, which we hope, knock on wood, somewhere is sometime in the summer.
That's great. That'll be fantastic. And I know that's a big part of the industry, and where we're seeing issues is getting those people to support, to be able to function again. All right, so we will go to a question and answer session now. So if you haven't asked the question and you've got one, put it on the right-hand side in the questions tab. I'm going to start with question. What type of guidelines for reopening on tourism businesses do we think the state will provide, particularly for accommodations and restaurants? I don't know, Lynn, do you want to start with that one?
I'll take that because that's the world we're living in right now. So my phone's ringing off the hook from restaurateurs and hoteliers, or especially restaurateurs who are ready to get back in business. Hotels, they understand, demand has to drive that, but on the restaurant front, they are eager and ready and asking, what do you know? What do you know? We have put together a restaurant and lodging recovery task force. They will be meeting again tomorrow. We've done a lot of preliminary work in preparation for a meeting, and we expect to roll out a plan for opening back up as early as late this week. We're following guidance from the National Restaurant Association, who's been working with the FDA on regulations that they're recommending for restaurants, best practices. We're also talking with colleagues around the country. So what we're trying, and we've been working very closely with the Department of Public Health, with Mandy Cohen and her team, who, by the way, we work with every single day. They're the folks who inspect both restaurants and hotels. And so they're the very people who will be playing a role with the governor and emergency management, Mike Sprayberry and his team, on what those requirements are going to be. But I would expect that they will include something like maybe some kind of face covering, hopefully not just a mask for face covering to start. Remember, we're going to do a phased in approach, so probably a phase 1 and then a phase 2 and a phase 3. I think we can expect social distancing of 6 feet apart, so tables 6 feet apart, which will mean that restaurants are operating at 25 to 50% capacity. Realistically, for many of our members, we're finding from the survey we did, that will not be enough to allow them to open and to make money. So many of them will choose to remain in in their current mode of either closure or limited delivery takeout, because the in-service model of 6 feet apart probably is not going to make business. They're scaled. Their business model is around, operating at full capacity. So that model may not work for many of them, and we're currently surveying that right now. But I think we'll see, number one, social distancing, including lines and teeing people up, and service. We'll see maybe some face coverings, some more stringent cleaning requirements. But let me just assure you, those are already taking place. There's no cleaner place in our state to eat than a restaurant or food service establishment. They are heavily regulated by law and inspected. And so the one thing I can guarantee you is that any restaurant, or most restaurants you eat in, are cleaner than your kitchens at home. And same thing goes with lodging establishments who are heavily regulated. So, additional sanitation requirements. You'll likely see requirements for more hand sanitizers. And I believe you will see things that we're trying to manage, things like temperature checks for employees. We run into some, legal issues around that, but requirements of folks to do some health screening, whether it's actual temperature check or just asking questions with every shift change as employees come online. We'd like to point out too that we believe this is a two-way street. So not only do restaurants and hotels have to protect consumers, but consumers, guests coming into those establishments also have a role to play. And that is, please don't come to our restaurants or our hotels if you're sick, if you've been exposed. And so we want to be clear about this, that while we're willing to take additional steps and responsibility, the general public has to do that too. So those are the kinds of things we have been working closely. There's been a task force meeting about what those regulations will look like. Don't know where we're landed yet, but our goal will be to get something that ensures guest safety and help and safety of public health, but also is manageable for the business community and doesn't put too much pressure. I will add that, these steps that I've just talked about add additional operating costs to restaurants and hotels. That hand sanitizers, those gloves, those masks that probably have to be changed, twice a shift. I mean, they're not something you can just wear all day. You can't just set them down on the counter, you dispose of them and get a clean one. Those are the kind of things that add expenses. And so with all of this, we will be actively looking for some tax credits and relief, because we're doing this in the interest of, public safety. So that's what we can expect. And as far as the when, the governor has a stay-at-home order through April 31st, I guess it is, the end of April. I would expect that we're going to see that extended because, as we know, even the president's saying, 14 days of no increase in cases. We're not quite there yet. We will probably be going into mid-May, I'm guessing at least, and just hoping for the best so that we can get back in a phased approach to reopening.
Yeah, and I think it's so great to hear that, Lynn, your group is working on that. One of the things we're seeing in that research is that there's a lot of fear out there among the traveling public and residents as well. So when we do open, we're not just going to have to market our assets and who we are and what we are, but we're going to have to market that cleanliness and the fact that we are paying attention to that and that we do care about it. And so a program like that, I think, will be a fantastic benefit for us as we try and turn the corner on this. So thanks, Lynn. Okay, next question is in terms of a relief and stimulus for DMOs, how should it be shared? Will the $7 million be shared among the partners, large and small destinations? None of that has really been laid out in this plan yet. My strategy is we can all agree that we need help. A lot of us are going to disagree on how that help should be distributed. So let's get the help right now and get that. And once we've got the money, we'll set up a plan to do some way to distribute that plan among people. Of course, most likely Visitation or the EDPNC would be the bank of that, and those activities would be in our co-op program, so we can help assist with media planning and things like that. But none of that's been really worked out. I think we don't want to get distracted and bogged down in the details. What we really want to do is have everybody together behind this push to get some support, any type of support whatsoever. Okay, our next question from Halifax is, have you heard about any threats on occupancy taxes using outside legislation or collections? Maybe Kara or Brian?
I'm happy to speak to that. In terms of threats to occupancy tax guidelines that the House follows in any type of legislation, we have not heard of any threats there. I do think that we've heard of a number of CBVs and TDAs that have been asked by some of their tourism business partners if they could be assisting them financially with occupancy tax dollars. We've done some research on that and spoken to the council over at the General Assembly who handles occupancy tax policy. So when you think about the guidelines, if your statute follows the guidelines, 2/3 of your proceeds from the tax need to go for marketing, and then 1/3 can go for tourism related expenditures. That definition is broad and flexible by design because every locality is a little bit different in their needs. However, as we've talked about that definition of tourism related expenditures, there's more questions that are raised than answers in terms of, can those dollars be used for direct financial assistance to businesses. And so we've been told that it's unlikely that those funds could be used in their current statute as they're identified. And that's where, to Lynn's point, I think some of these businesses, it's really trying to bolster those federal dollars with the Paycheck Protection Program, other tax credit relief, and other programs. That's really probably the financial support that the tourism businesses could have best access to. But in terms of legislation that's a threat, we have not encountered that.
I'd like to add to that, Whit, and say that Kara's right. Nothing inside the General Assembly, but we've been writing about this in our NCTIA newsletter that comes out every Friday. We've been writing about some of the grassroots movements in some communities that would like to do away with the occupancy tax. A big campaign going on right now in Asheville to do away with the occupancy tax, turn it into a program around affordable housing and green space, and divorce it really from its promotion of tourism. While that has not made its way into the General Assembly, there are certainly candidates from Asheville that are running on this issue, and we're monitoring it closely. We're concerned about it. We're trying to educate the public about why the occupancy tax is so important to a community like Asheville. But what starts off as a small movement can build, and so it's important that we're aware of what's going on.
And I'll just speak briefly and just kind of echo what my colleagues have said. We're going to fight long and hard, and we will not let occupancy taxes be diverted to things that they should not be diverted to. However, I will say to you that I am hearing from legislators that we are in unprecedented times, and in unprecedented times is the time to take a hard look at some of these kind of things. We're going to have to be vigilant, but I will assure you that those taxes are collected by hotels across North Carolina. And you can bet your bottom dollar that I'm not going to sit by and let my hotelier stand for that. I think they will speak up and they will protest, and they will be very vocal in making sure that the dollars that they have agreed, I will add, have agreed to collect because they value the work that DMOs across the state do, and they value the vigilance that the partners on this call, the way that you all spend and invest those dollars wisely. They respect that, and they will not stand for it. So we're not going to sit by. We're going to work together and make sure those dollars go to the kinds of things that are going to continue to market and promote destinations across our state, and also to those investments, those smart investments in communities across North Carolina that help to bolster our tourism economy. I'm worried, and I know Brian spoke to this when he testified the other day at the General Assembly, but we also know that a lot of these tax dollars go to fund ball fields, they fund convention centers, they fund, a lot of infrastructure products that are an important part of our tourism offering in many destinations across North Carolina. So, we've got to be smart and strategic about this. We cannot give away the goose that laid the golden egg. And even though, sometimes those dollars look like they could be attractive to fund all kinds of things, I'm confident that you all on this phone have to be strong, and I'm committed to making sure hoteliers have your backs because we've got to make sure these dollars are doing the kinds of things that are going to fuel our economy going forward.
Okay, and our next question, I think, Lynn, this sort of for you. So will tourism development authorities be included as an opportunity to receive the bridge loan programs? Not all TDAs are CDBs. So I think most businesses would be eligible, right?
That's interesting. I will have to go back and look at the legislation. It was, I have the House version. It will also have opportunity to be amended in the Senate. That's creative thought. We can go back and look at that, and certainly something the three of us here can work together to try to get incorporated in that. I don't think we have any opposition. I did talk at length with Scott Hamilton, who runs Golden Leaf, this morning about the program. It's capped at $50,000. He did tell me that that only about 4% of those have gone to larger businesses. Most of those are really being targeted at those kind of real small businesses. I don't know that there's a definition of business or organization that can receive this, but that might be a creative approach to getting at some of this funding that we need for DMOs.
Yeah, that would be great. And that was such an issue with the PPP, is that so many of our DMOs are quasi-governmental or not quite fitting into those classic business categories. We had another question. How does the $20 million recovery plan impact Visit NC's budget in the next fiscal year? My hope, and I wanted to make this clear, is that it is in addition to the Visit NC program, not the program. So obviously our hope would be that we can run our standard program, which drives visitation to the state, as well as do this recovery effort, which is a separate effort to generate business and will primarily be focused on in-state and much closer in markets, which are great visitors, but they don't bring the spend that people from the drive markets a little further out spend. So we hope that it'll be in addition to. Is there let's see, what are the legal ramifications that may be involved with reopening? Can a store, restaurant, hotel attraction be sued if an employee unknowingly infects a guest? I'm guessing that's a Lynn question.
Yeah, we've got our eyes on that. So another thing that the General Assembly's been working on are some policy changes. And there was a bill drafted. I guess I just received it and reviewed it quickly before we hopped on this call, but need to dive into a little bit more. And it's intended to address some of those liability and other kinds of policy changes that are needed to make sure we move safely move forward in a safe manner. So we'll take a look at that. But there are a lot of liability issues that we're concerned about. In the state of Illinois, for example, their organization that oversees workers' comp just came in yesterday, 2 days ago, and basically shifted the blame from the employee to the employer. So in other words, if you make an employee come to work, have an employee come into your establishment and they get COVID-19, in the state of Illinois today, the burden is on the business owner to prove that they did not expose that employee versus the employee saying, I got it from work. So there are a lot of these scary things going on, even mandates about masks. There can be some liability around that. There can be, we're concerned about liability around some of the health checks, in particular if they're temperature checks around that. I mean, are you really going to have a 20-year-old checking somebody's temperature when they check in? I mean, are they, certified to say that this person's okay to come to work? There's a whole lot of issues as we're out there in the wild, wild west, really. But we're focused on those. I know Isabel and Frank and Margot, our lobbying team, is focused on that, as well as some of our federal counterparts on, best practices. So we'll be working to protect businesses as best we can.
Great. And we're kind of relating to that, another question: will owners be encouraged to offer staff training on proper use of masks, gloves, etc., to avoid cross-contamination?
So I'm glad you asked that question. You and I had a little bit of a conversation about this yesterday, but I'm real excited to share news that I think we've made some really good progress along that line. We, as I mentioned, work very closely with the Department of Public Health, and this morning presented a proposal to Secretary Mandy Cohen for funding for COVID-19 training for the hospitality industry. It met with a very favorable response from her, and she's asked me to provide a little bit more information. And so as soon as I get off this call, that's on my to-do list today. But we expect some funding, maybe upwards to $500,000, that we're going to create a training program that will be done by NC State University. They have a section there. In fact, a nationally renowned expert in food safety and sanitation, public health, is there. He's been on a number of national TV outlets during this pandemic. He is a nationally renowned expert. We have contracted with him. He will produce the training for us, and it will be things like, back of the house training for restaurateurs, front of the house training for servers, but that can also extend to frontline. I know Nick Breedlove on one of our task forces mentioned, even outdoor outfitters need to know best practices. How do you wipe down when somebody uses an ink pen to sign their credit card and add a tip to your business? What do you do with that pen? It's not clean now. What do we do about that? Disposables. You can't have salt and pepper shakers on the table. So this goes above and beyond the food safety and security and hospitality safety that we as an industry provide every single day. This is a whole new thing about wiping down door handles. You can't have people go into a salad bar using a utensil like they did in the past. It's got to be served to them with somebody with gloves on their hands. And so, the new normal is going to look different. So we're working on a training program. We are, as a part of this funding, we've asked for kind of a good housekeeping seal of approval logo that would go in establishments who've taken this training. The training's designed to be video, web-based. So an employee who comes into your establishment could probably quickly take this. It'd be a video component about best practices, probably take them about 30 minutes to learn how to, practice best practices. It would be a partnership with Department of Public Health. So it's something that they would, help us to develop. And it's something that employees could take online. And then behind that, we would have a marketing and promotional campaign that we hope to partner with, WIT and the hospitality community statewide, so that we can kind of get out this message that our employees, our industry, we're all working together to ensure best practices for safety and public health. And we're working together to make sure that we, are doing everything we can to protect those consumers who come back in our establishments. It really is a two-way promise or a three-way promise, a sort of proposal. And so it says, we as hospitality providers are going to make sure we're doing everything we can. These are the steps. You can go to the website and see the steps that we're taking to protect you. But you also have a responsibility. So when you come into our establishment, we want to make sure that you're coming in. Your promise to us is that you're coming in and you haven't been exposed to COVID-19. You're not, you don't have a temperature. You're not having any of the symptoms when you come to our establishment, because we're concerned about our employees and we're concerned about our other patrons. And I think if we kind of come together in a way that helps people understand that we all have a responsibility in this as we open back up, I think we'll get some really positive response. It'll go a long way to ensuring confidence in all that we're doing to make businesses and to make each other, safe. So more to come on that. We hope to get some funding, and we'd love to partner, statewide to roll out a program that, as I talked to Whit, I think could really be, driven by his office. Honestly, I mean, we're not in the marketing business anymore. I did that at one time in life, but not so much anymore. But I think the folks at Visit NC could lead the way to kind of helping to create a logo, good housekeeping seal of approval that could be used on restaurant menus, hotel front door decals, just to say we embrace best practices.
Yeah, we're happy to do that. And I think that is the right way to go, the right way to head out with that marketing message of openness and safety. And our next question kind of relates to that. It says, do we have concerns of marketing to states and areas that have coronavirus hotspots? I tend to hope that this will take care of itself. I don't imagine we'll be really open and actually out there marketing while areas still really have hot spots. Now, that said, we can quietly, as much of this plan is digital marketing, and that with that digital marketing, we can avoid areas and we can geo-target to get areas that we want and not get areas that we don't want. So I think we'll be pretty good on that. Mike Butts had a comment. He said to Lynn's comments about cleanliness, the larger hotel company and restaurant companies will also have their own requirements and protocols that we can all promote, and they'll be able to encourage those. Mm-hmm. Nick Breedlove has asked that we remind people to endorse the Tourism Working Group proposal, and if you have any connections with your local legislators, to talk to them on a local level and encourage them to support it as well. And then one last question, are there any liability concerns that hotels should have if they are hosting medical personnel and possibly some of those individuals' families and their properties who are suffering from the virus? Lynn, are we back to you?
Yeah, the answer to that is yes, there are some liability concerns. And we've been working with hotels, not just us, but our national partners and the brands as well, providing guidance on cleaning procedures and protocols that have to be followed very strictly for those hotels that are offering shelter for those folks working on the front line. So yeah, they rest assured they are following very strict protocols, including changing air filters because this is an airborne disease, cleaning carpets. And in fact, in many cases, when they're done with this, I would expect, carpets and bedding and textiles to be replaced before they open up to the general public. So I'm pretty confident that there are some strict protocols in place for those who have signed contracts and are providing the kind of shelter that you've talked about.
Okay, well, we're running out of time. I want to thank our people. We had a few more questions. We will answer those to you people individually who asked them. But thanks so much to Lynn Minges, Kara Weishaar, and Brian Lewis, our wonderful team out there that's supporting us and doing more for us than we could possibly imagine. Thanks, guys. And we'll have another webinar next Wednesday at 10 a.m. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
You guys.